Hey guys, BigSquareRoadRoad.com. This is part two of the timeline. First of all, let me start with a date, and then I will try to my best to back it up. The date I would project as really kicking off the end game, as in the day the market goes sideways, and I'll explain how and why that happens. Would be September 11th, 2019. And I'm going to give you my reasoning. I've been saying that date for a little while now, but I really didn't sink in until I dug back into the Road to Roota documents. I looked at some more stuff. I did some psychic looking at that stuff. I did some RV work on that stuff. I talked to quite a few people who are keyed into that, including Cliff High, including Shell White Dove, and then Dick Allgire's information. I didn't get the date or anything like that from Dick, but I got some amazing stuff from his latest remote viewing on a different topic. And I wanted to share where I am. First of all, I would say everybody needs to get acquainted with the Road to Roota Teacher's Guide. If you haven't read it yet, please go read it. It is the teacher's guide that goes along with the comic book. The comic book is a comic book called Wishes and Rainbows. You can find it at roadtoroota.com in the education section and resources. On the left side, resources, right down here is all the Road to Roota information. But the teacher's guide is so key to understanding where we're going and where we're headed. You got to remember, this is all coming from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. The teacher's guide goes through some of the things that will happen in our future. The questions that need to be raised as far as scarcity and does the government come in and regulate what do we use as money? Why is it important to have scarcity in a monetary system? It talks about nationalization of mines. It talks about all kinds of things in this document. Read it. It's easy to read. It was written by a guy named Stephen DeVoe. Stephen DeVoe was a computer programmer in the 70s. He was part of the military intelligence and worked for the Fed Boston. He put together this comic book and the pamphlet based off a 1979 article. And the article was originally written by Deborah Carpenter Beck. And here it is, the first page of both the 1981 version of this comic and the 2007 version. Stephen DeVoe right here, military intelligence, computer programming expert in project implementation. He's the guy who created the comic book from a short story written by Deborah Carpenter Beck about what was going on, about the rigging of the markets, the need for a gold-backed system back then when it was written in 79. And then it's interesting because the pamphlet or the article came out in 79. The original book was 81, came out in 81. That's right when the Gold Commission was started. They were ready to go back on a gold standard, and then the can was kicked down the road. I do not believe the can is going to be kicked down the road this time. All signs are pointing to kicking the can to cryptos. But that can has got to be kicked in a different way. Back then, there wasn't trillions of dollars in derivatives that were being dealt with. Now there is. Absolutely. That is the guarantee of a total destruction, a total monetary meltdown as described by Warren Buffett, a weapon of mass financial destruction. All right, so let's just keep in mind the 9/11 number. 9/11, if you've read my earlier research, you go through the comic book, the Fed comic book that came out here January of 2007. It was actually January 1st. I was there on the website that moment, that second that they put it up. They put it up with a huge red exclamation point on the Fed Boston website. Why I was there, what I was doing there, how I ended up here is all for your own speculation. Was it meant to be? Of course it was. Was it luck or happenstance? No, it was not. There was a reason I was there at that moment in time. All right. Did I recognize what was going on at the time? No, not at all. I'm like, a comic book? The Fed has a comic book? And then I read it. I'm like, this is the weirdest freaking comic book I've ever seen. and then read my analysis on it, you're going to just scratch your head and say, oh my God, that is what it's saying. That there are good guys behind the scenes looking to take out the bad guys. Here's Roota, who's Alan Greenspan, talking to his grandmother, who is Arthur Burns, the head of the Fed at the time, talking about going back onto a gold standard. This is the big one right here. Roota asks her grandma, why don't we go back to a gold standard? And look what grandma says, because the people who live in Colorland are very big and might actually step on a pebble person. Horrifying comic book for a little kid. And all our people are afraid to go there. And Roota, Alan Greenspan, says, I'm not afraid, Grandma. I often play in those caves. And someday I will find a way back to Colorland and bring back some of those colored flowers. And then it goes into looking for gold in the Grand Canyon, finding gold. And the gold is represented by colored flowers, by the way, if you haven't read the comic book yet. It's full analysis at Road to Roota. It's all about scarcity. And then she leaves the canyon, pulls out a little bit of gold, and then there's an avalanche. If you've seen the movie McKinley's Gold, you'll understand what really happened in the Grand Canyon after they found those billions of ounces. Yes, billions of ounces were found in the Grand Canyon. Here's the New York Times article in June 19th, 1912. Tell of vast riches in the Grand Canyon. Billions and billions of ounces found in the Grand Canyon. And there was only 30 million ounces of gold in circulation, in monetary gold in circulation in the United States. You have billions and billions of ounces, you have a complete destruction of the current power system, the current governance system, the current monetary system. So they locked it up. Woodrow Wilson put the Grand Canyon into a national park, and nobody's allowed to take a pebble out of there yet. But back to Wishes and Rainbows. So much stuff packed in here. I analyzed it fairly fully. I still find things now and then. They go back to the canyon. They can't get the gold. Start the oil standard. But look at what Roota writes in the sand. This is just another thing. Now this, you got to remember when this came out. January of 2007 it came out. So they had to draw it. So in at least 2006, 2005, if there was any clues to be sent through, they would have to know about it in 2005, 2006. Look what Roota writes in the sand right here on page 15. It used to be a formula called On the Road to the Golden Age in the first comic book. This is the only thing. There's one more thing that was changed. But this is the only thing that was changed besides the cartoon characters that were drawn. And I did contact the artist, and I said, well, why did you write that in the sand? And she said, I didn't. It was blank when she turned it in. Just more confirmation on the Road to Roota. 11 plus 9, and then remember, this came out in 2007, so the planning was at least 2006, 2005. So way back then, before, they were planning something for 9/11. And as I talked about in the first video, on 9/11, 2008 was when the monetary system, the computers were clicked and everything was flooding out of the system. That was the moment, and it was at 11 o'clock in the morning on 9/11. Now think ahead. Right now, think ahead. What is significant about 9/11 this year? Well, number one, 9/11 2019 is 11 years after 9/11 2008. 11 years to the day. Not only that, what's the month number? 9. 9/11. What is the full date of September 11th, 2019? Would be 911119. If you write it out, 9/11/19. Frontwards and backwards, you get 9/11. It's spooky, I know, but these people love numerology. And if they had planned the 9/11 financial attack for 9/11/2008 years beforehand, don't you think if they are going to plan a new one, it will be years beforehand and it's already baked in the cards? Not to mention all the economic data pointing to a collapse coming. We just don't know when. I think it's going to happen at 11 o'clock in the morning on 9/11. Or it could happen at 9 o'clock in the morning on 9/11. 2019. Now, what else do we have to back this stuff up? First of all, I have posted, linked I don't know if it's the full video, but the Frontline documentary on Alan Greenspan and why. It doesn't say why. It says the fact that Alan Greenspan created derivatives to destroy the system. He was the guy pushing for no regulations, fighting this woman Sheila Bair. Great documentary. So go to Frontline or watch it right. I'll put it below this video. Watch the documentary. Watch it in full. And actually, KQED has a huge spread on it. It goes from each topic, from 87 when they hired Greenspan to the Clinton team, the Bankers Trust derivative scandal. Remember, they sold all the Bankers Trust derivatives to Deutsche Bank, and that's where they reside now. And it was in the 90s that almost blew up the entire market. Long-term capital management. This is all part of the same game. The idea of blowing the bubbles bigger, but you need to assure that the next crash is going to destroy everything, because you have to destroy everything to move on to something new. You cannot, quietly take away the derivatives. You have to take away the debt. You got to remove the bankers from power. And where's their power? Electronic money that they have in their possession. They have access to. You take that away, they no longer have money. They can't pay their henchmen to go off and kill CFTC chairman even. So yes, it is a huge thing. Watch this video, very important. Now let's talk about 9/11/2019. That's the date. That's the date I believe it is going to happen. And I have an idea of how it will happen and what will happen. But I want to talk about a couple of my friends who are kind of right in the same path. First is Snippy. Now, I'm not going to give you any of his Patreon stuff, but he has, his guru friend has very significant things happening in September of 2019. So much so that he has Litecoin going 4-1 to Bitcoin. I'm not going to give you the prices they said, but let me just tell you, Litecoin's a lot higher. Going 4-1 with Bitcoin, his psychic is saying. How long have I been saying 4-1? And he has it bang right in the smack dab in the middle of September. And if you want to, hey, Snippy has a great Patreon channel. I would suggest if you have the money, absolutely become a Snippy Patreon follower. The next is Michelle Whitedove. I had a reading with Michelle, and she is the number one psychic on planet Earth. Absolutely, no doubt in my mind. This is my second reading from Michelle, but she got it wrong. She got the crypto moonshot wrong. She had it for September of 2008. Spirit was telling her September of 2008, back in 2017. She got it wrong. Now, why did she get it wrong? I think it's what I discussed in one of my videos this morning, that a section of time was removed and changed. And I believe our souls live in a template of what's potentially going to happen, and then we navigate it and make it, call it our own, and that's how we can influence the future and things like that. Some powerful entity was able to shift the timeline out a year. And that powerful entity had a lot of ability to rig markets with derivatives, crypto markets, to rig gold and silver further. And a big portion of it is to be able to get that Mt. Gox trustee to sell off the real crypto, the real Bitcoin into the market to help facilitate the downward crash. So someone went in there with enough power to say, okay, here's what you do and when you do it. And they did it absolutely on purpose. So all these things were done and I think they were all done because this dark side, the crypto cabal, as I call them, was running the price up too high. It was getting away from the people. So they slammed it down. Now there's other people being able to get in. I do think it was just literally a 1 year's chunk that was inserted, and then we're going to kick right in from where Cliff High was talking about in the end of 2018, the $100,000 Bitcoin parties by the end of the year. And if we do have a financial collapse or wobble, I don't know if it'll be full. It probably should be full with the derivative situation. But it would, if the markets stay together, I can see 100,000. If they break apart, who knows what the price is? 100 million. You name your price because the old system will have died. I do think they'll attempt to kick the can a little farther down, but still the big economic upset is going to come in on September 11th, 2019. From my prediction, if you want a date, that's the date, but it will last for years, and but it will. People will look back at that date like we right now. We look back at September 2008. Nobody really talks about September 11th. And it was never talked about until Ken Jaworski came out and said, on Thursday of last week, he came to us on the 15th. On the Thursday before, at 11 o'clock, people were withdrawing money to the tune of $500 billion. That was September 11th. And we're coming up now to September 11th. So anyway, back to Michelle White Dove. Great psychic. I did talk to her about what is coming down the pike. And she says, I never get it wrong, but Spirit got it wrong. But now Spirit's saying September 2019. The same thing. Spirit is telling her the same thing, except it's this year now because they removed that year. So, hey, believe what you want about psychics. Michelle has told me things that no one even knew about my life. So I'm all on board that, one, she's not going to get 100% right. Because, again, we live as a framework where our souls operate, and it can be changed. But I think she's right on this, that everything's right back on track, along with Cliff's $100,000 Bitcoin parties, along with Snippy, his psychic friend, is saying, at least for Litecoin, which is the key, because if the old system dies, they'll be looking for a means of exchange. And that means of exchange, the number one means of exchange, pretty much everybody admits within the cryptos, is going to be Litecoin. So if you see a 4-to-1 ratio of Bitcoin and Litecoin coming in September of 2019, that would tell me that, the financial system fell apart, and people are looking at Litecoin as a means of exchange. That's how it would basically close the gap between, right now it's 93-to-1. You can buy 93 Litecoin for just one Bitcoin. It's crazy. So that gap will close. I mean, according to Snippy's, and I've felt this for quite a while, for years. But according to Snippy's psychic friend, September is the time frame for that as well. So you got Snippy, you got Cliff, you got Michelle White Dove, all of this, and then you got the 9/11/19 coming up, and we know these people are all into numerology. We know that the Fed set the date of 9/11 for 2008 long before, because they wrote it in a comic that they released in January of 2007. Okay, here's the latest piece of news, and the final thing I want to say, and it's about my friend Dick Allgaier. It's all the whole crypto viewing team is very talented people. They have a great Patreon channel, so I'm not going to give away a lot of the information. I'm not going to give away any information of what they do on Patreon. But there are some things. They did a remote viewing of the US dollar. And there were 2 slides in there that Dick Allgaier came up with. And the interesting thing about psychics and RV, remote viewing, and all that stuff is, you have your data, and then you have people interpreting it. Michelle White Dove has the same thing. Michelle doesn't really run her Patreon other than they ask Michelle for it. It's all interpreted by a group of people. I don't agree with the group a lot of the times. I agree with Michelle. If you talk to Michelle, she's the first to say she doesn't know much at all about cryptocurrencies. But she's going to tell you her version of what Spirit's telling them. So on Michelle's channel, you get a lot of interpretation by people other than Michelle. And I mean, even with Snippy, you got psychics who are interpreting the data that they get, and then Snippy's interpreting that data. Crypto viewing is hugely into it. I don't agree with their interpretations. That's why I keep telling Dick, I just need the raw data. Give me the raw data from the viewing sessions, not the explanation. Because I think they get the explanation wrong a lot of the times. At least wrong in the road to Roota analysis, the way I look at it. So I picked out 2 of the, I think it was like 20 or 30 pages that they talked about. It was three remote viewers. It was Daz and Edward and Dick. Daz Smith, Edward Reardon, and Dick Allgaier. And they remote viewed the US dollar. Now, they came to Dick is kind of combines psychic ability with he's been doing it the longest. I think it's psychic with his RV. I mean, he usually nails it. He had a problem with this because the question was all over the board. There was like 3 questions, and they asked for a timeline. And I mean, I couldn't even if you knew the question, you wouldn't even know what they were asking. So it was poorly tasked, in my opinion. But we did get some documentation out of it. And let me show you that right here. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple screens. They interpreted it completely different, but here's my interpretation. And this is Dick, and he was seeing these computer screens and the velocity of money and big displays. Now remember, he's viewing the U.S. dollar, and it didn't have a time on it. It didn't have anything other than what you interpret, and they interpret a lot of chaos for the U.S. dollar. I see it as much bigger than that. It's clear that these are all computer screens dealing in derivatives. Remember, the U.S. dollar is not treasury bonds, is not the cash in hand, is not the cash at the bank. The vast majority of trading that goes on in the U.S. dollar, in all of it, is derivative trading. Derivatives of foreign exchange derivatives. Trillions of... Jamie Dimon says they put out $5 trillion a day out of their Florida office. That's all derivative trading. So that's how they control all currencies on planet Earth, is through derivatives. And so he has this thing. It's like there's mayhem, there's pandemonium, everything's going crazy. Now I'm saying this is September 11th. This is what's going to happen on September 11th, 2019. The craziness within the computers. It's all about computers that Alan Greenspan invented in the 60s and 70s. This is how I bring it back to Road to Roota. And then this one really got me. And Dick was explaining it, how these computers are just crashing into each other. And all the algorithms are jamming against each other. And you can't get anything done. And it's just not working. And factions fighting each other. Computers at war. Mainframe computers at war. Now, they interpreted it differently than I do. I see this as September 11th. This is what's going to happen. Mainframe computers at war. Splitting commands, microsecond algorithms, the freeze up internally within the control system, within the Fed, the U.S. Treasury, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, China, Russia, everybody attacking everybody. Like I said, it most likely from a click of a mouse from whoever's got that controller. Well, is it still Alan Greenspan? Potentially. But it can happen real fast. And this is exactly what would happen. The freezing of markets, because you need interconnectivity with computers around the world to keep this Ponzi scheme going. And you look at this, I mean, this is all from a number. My God. These guys at Crypto Viewer, you got to subscribe to Crypto Viewer and Patreon. They know what they're doing. Just you got to do your own analysis on it. So Forex, money transfers, splitting commands, microsecond algorithms, trying to outsmart each other. Dueling algos, seize up, loop of chaos, execute trades before the other one does, but algorithm blocks it. That's chaos in a financial market. Pure chaos. Now we get to win. And the crazy thing is, in the tasking, there's like 4 questions to the tasking. And remember, it's just a number they use. They just looking at a number. So you want something very specific if you're gonna task one of these things. And they asked like 4 questions, and one was, "Oh, give us a timeline when all this is gonna happen." And Dick did a timeline and talked about it and said, it's not way into the future, but it's pretty close. But I would say 4 to 5 years, something like this would happen. But that's not what the question was. And see, this is where they get all confused. The question was, what happens between... They gave a time frame. It didn't say just in the future. They asked for a specific timeline within specific dates. And I'll show you. And see, Dick has it right here, right there. So it's, he was saying, well, here's 200 years in the future and it's going to happen right here. So maybe 4, 5, 6 years out. That's not what the question asks. And here's the question. The viewer is to describe and sketch the United States dollar chart movement from present time to the year 2025. So the end of this chart is 2025. So when you're looking at what does this represent? If this is 2025 and this is 2019, that's still in 2019. Or at least close to near 2019. And I drew it out here. If that's 2025, here's 2022, here's 2019. September, October 2019. The present time is June of 2019. It is short. What Dick got confused about is what the future represented and forgot to look back at the question. Chart movement from present time to the year 2025. And look where that line is, right at the front. Front loaded between now and 2025. Again, back to September 2019. Interesting, huh? Yes, absolutely subscribe to Crypto Viewing. It's kind of pricey, but it's worth it if you're into remote viewing the future. Very, very good job on this one. So yeah, that's where I am with and why with when and how this is all going to happen. Again, it's the computers fighting each other. And Root A is a computer term. Go back and learn about Root A. And then ultimately we get to this. If you want more on the Fed, I love people who say, what are you talking about? There's no Fed comic books. Oh yeah, here. Contact the Community Service Department at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. But where is the end? What is it going to look like? What would Roota think about the end? Right here, very end of the comic book. But the townspeople are still not content after they got their flowers. Many want 2, 3, or even 4 flowers of their own. Since Roota cannot grow that many in only 2 sunlit caves, she and Rocky still search for another opening to Colorland. And here's the September summer day. So don't be surprised. If some summer day when you're lying on the green grass and looking at the blue sky, you hear voices coming from underground. It could be Rocky and Roota searching for the entrance to Colorland. Dun, dun, dun. So there's my date, September 11th, 2019. This is Bix Weir. Hey, don't bet the farm on it though. Remember, this is just my prediction. And I told you how I got there, and my psychic ability really feels like it's gonna be coming true. And we might not even know it. That's the crazy thing. We didn't know it last time. The computer just has seized up on September 11th, 2008. And we didn't know it until Ken Jaworski came out 2 days later and said, oh, we had to bail out the banks. I don't think there's going to be a bailout. I'll get to that in another video. Bix, Road to Roota. Good luck, guys. Talk to you later.